Hi everyone, and welcome to our latest edition of Sitrion Talks. Today we have an awesome panel who are joining us from around the US. We're going in-house today and we're talking adoption with our very own enterprise engagement managers, Allison Maguire, Oster and Audrey Patchett. Before we start, I just want to remind everyone that we are broadcasting live on YouTube. You can't talk to us, but we'd love to hear from you. The Q&A panel is open, so if you would like to ask a question, please do so. We're monitoring it here at this end. We're also following the hashtag #SitrionTalks, so feel free to jump on there and send us a tweet, and you'll see that some of my panelists today have got their Twitter profiles listed on the screen, so you can say hi to them as well. Without any further ado, we are talking adoption today. I won't introduce the panelists for you. I'll let them introduce themselves. So guys, hi, welcome to your first Sitrion Talks.
Hi, Luke.
Hi.
Hi, Luke.
Let's introduce you guys one at a time. Let's start with Allison.
I'm Allison Maguire, and I'm a Senior Engagement Manager for Sitrion. And I guess I could tell you a little bit about how I got here. I know that's one of your first questions. You want me to start there?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. I started out I worked in sort of a bunch of different fields in technology for over 15 years. I started out in knowledge management, actually, and I got really interested in collaboration at that time. Sort of before social was a big thing, but people were into wikis and blogs and exploring those areas. I worked for a large CPG company, and I was responsible for adoption of their social network, their enterprise social network. And that sort of led me to Sitrion. And that was sort of my path. And I'm super, super passionate about helping people be successful in collaboration and looking at that big picture, that holistic view that really allows people to be successful.
Cool.
So that's my story.
Thanks, Allison. It's good to have you here on Sitrion Talks. Amy, do you want to introduce yourself? Tell us a little about how you made it to become an engagement manager at Sitrion.
Sure thing. Hi, Luke. So I am Amy Oster, and I'm a Senior Engagement Manager over here at Sitrion. Like Allison, I've had about, well, more than 15 years of technology experience. I started SharePoint consulting in 2007. That seems like a really long time. And I was doing SharePoint portal launches and redesigns for that. In that, I've always done a lot of work around adoption and making sure that those portal launches or redesign launches were successful. So I know we're going to talk about that a little bit more, Luke. The last role I had was a consulting company that actually used Sitrion's product, and I loved it so much that I wanted to work here. So this was the only company I contacted, and here I am.
Awesome. Well, it's good to have you on Sitrion Talks as well. And Audrey, last but not least, over in San Francisco, you want to introduce yourself and let us know a little bit about your career path?
Sure. So I am also an engagement manager at Sitrion. I started as a professional. I'm a project manager, but about 8 years ago I was at a product company that worked with external communities and basically linking people up for events and external type events. And that evolved into internal communities, and I started to get a lot of interest in helping customers with building out their internal social networks. So that leads me to Sitrion 8 years later, and all along the way I've been working with different companies, big enterprise, small companies, working to roll out enterprise social software.
Awesome. So as you can see, we've got three very experienced, super knowledgeable panelists joining us today, and I think there are no better people who are well equipped to talk about adoption, to talk about some of the challenges that you might be facing, and to share with us some of their experience and how they have addressed those with our customers. These are really our front line here at Sitrion in terms of engagement and adoption services. Guys, I thought we would kick off with talking about adoption hurdles. You guys work with lots of our customers on a day-to-day basis, and you are helping to overcome those hurdles all the time. So let's look at what an example of adoption success looks like. From your experience, what does it look like when the network is thriving and is super healthy? Let's go back the other way this time. We'll start with you, Audrey.
Sure. So the clients that I think of or that come to mind when people ask me what have you seen that's been successful, it really does pull in a lot of the components that we put forth in our adoption framework. But the projects that I've seen be very successful have incredible support from their leadership teams. They have investment, so they invest in community management, and they invest in ongoing promotion and education to their end users to make that successful, which also includes trying to figure out ways that it's going to be valuable to their users. So that, on the flip side, that's just to say, I've also seen engagements where there hasn't been that commitment from leadership or that investment in community management or that need for helping users understand what they're supposed to do with the tool, and those are the instances that are not successful.
Awesome. Amy, do you want to share some of what your experience and what success looks like?
Sure. So a lot of that Audrey really covered, so I'm just going to cover a couple key points from her, and Allison, I know you're probably going to cover some of those as well. When I think about adoption, I think about overcoming a level of fear within the organization about being social, and what does social mean? And I think people are afraid to be visible unless they have the support of their management. So what I always suggest and what our adoption framework really helps guide is a discussion with senior leaders about how they can interact, what kinds of things they can comment and post on a site, and how they can comment and urge people to communicate more. The top-down activities really drive everything, and as Audrey said, it has to align with a business vision. But I think that once people feel safe and secure and know that they won't be penalized for doing something that is now a technical tool, now it seems like it's serious and social, I think that is one of the best ways. And I was just focusing on one. Of course, there's a lot of other things I could talk about, but on one.
Absolutely. Allison?
Thanks, Luke. So Audrey and Amy covered quite a good few examples of some of the barriers and the hurdles to being successful. And I think that what success means to you and to your organization really depends on what your business goals are. So we talked a little bit, they both talked a little bit about vision, right? What's your business vision? What are you trying to achieve? And I think it's very tempting to look for that one cookie cutter approach that just is, what's my recipe for success? Just tell me what I need to do and I'll be successful. But the reality is that you need to focus in on what are you trying to achieve. You start with your business requirements. What are the goals that you're trying to achieve, and what are the business processes potentially that you're trying to enable with collaboration, with social collaboration? And if you start there, then you have a better chance of finding your organization's recipe for success. So there really is no one cookie cutter approach that will make you successful. We can definitely hold up and give really good examples, but I think it's important that people focus in on what are they trying to achieve. And this actually happens not just at the enterprise level, at the organization level, but also at the community level. So, even if you're just talking about how do I make my individual community successful, it's the same premise. You need to start with what are you trying to achieve.
Absolutely. And I think, having come from a corporate enterprise community manager background myself, I absolutely agree with that and everything that all you guys said. I mean, I think you started to touch on this a little bit, but I mean, if we're looking at success and we're not starting from that kind of blank slate, where do I go with this? What are the kind of mistakes that you think that companies are making when they're rolling out an enterprise social network, when they're really trying to push engagement? What are some of the pitfalls you've experienced, and how do you kind of what are your warnings, I guess, to some of our viewers?
I'll take that first, if you don't mind.
Sure.
So, the first thing that comes to mind is, it's installing software, but it should not be an IT-led project. That's the first thing. It needs to have business representation so that it can gather support and momentum and talk about the things other than successfully installing the software, what it means to be successful. So, Allison, that touches a lot on what you talked about, matching up actual business needs. So I think making it broader than just IT is my key point there.
Sure. Audrey, do you have something?
Yeah, I would say a lot of times I see that organizations have this expectation that you're going to turn on the software and everyone's going to start magically collaborating. And it really is it's wanting to set the expectations with companies that it's a process and it's time, and it's really about changing the culture, about how people work together, and that does take a lot of time. So when you are starting out, I've had situations where, and I'm kind of pulling off of Allison what you said about needing to be able to establish your goals and your vision and know your requirements, which is, I think, sometimes misunderstood when I work with companies, because they'll say, we know our goals, we know our requirements, and in 6 months we want to have X results. And it's a little bit hard to be able to predict the future like that until you really start rolling up your sleeves, sitting with the end users that are going to be using the tool and understanding the value that they're going to be getting out of it. Certainly you need to have a vision of how you hope that they'll get value out of it, but I think sometimes, or oftentimes, I've worked with companies and they kind of set themselves up for disappointment by putting unrealistic goals right ahead of them. So it's setting expectations, being willing to be iterative, and working to make sure you're getting value, but not necessarily setting unattainable goals right out of the gate.
Allison?
So I'll just build on what Amy and Audrey said, which is I think that you set goals, right? So you want to have metrics or KPIs in place. You want to have some goals. But as Audrey pointed out, you want to have flexibility built in to be able to respond to those and make sure that you have the right metrics. So we have a really great module or aspect of our product called the engagement scorecard, which allows our users to be able to measure adoption across their enterprise and also at a community level. And when we set up those initial metrics with them, we define them and we say, okay, let's set your goals, let's set your thresholds that you want to aim for, and then we assume that there's going to be a little shakeout period in the first month or two where you're going to see if those were the right goals, right? And so similar to that, sort of at a quantitative level, also at a qualitative level, you need to be looking at, do you have all of the right foundation in place, if you will? So if you're going to set achievable goals and you have a very clear vision about what you want to achieve as an organization, do you have the foundational elements in place that are going to guide that success, right? That are going to shepherd and steward that success as your network continues to mature. So if you think about community management, for instance, I've often seen organizations that think they'll get the tool out there, people are going to just go out there and participate and collaborate, and it will build up momentum, and it's going to be great because people will just go and they'll see the benefit of it, because we all know that there's benefit in sharing, right? But the reality is when you get down into your day-to-day work, you struggle to find that time, and other things will take priority. And so you need to have that stewardship, that community management program that will help to continue to nurture and grow that participation over time.
absolutely. And you know, what you guys were just saying reminded me of an example. You know, in a previous career of mine, when we were rolling out social across the entire enterprise of about 6,000 people strong company. And our community managers and I guess, you know, the stewards or shepherds, as you called them, we really spent a lot of time understanding the kind of activities we could shift into the social network and understanding how people did their work and how we could show them the new way of working in the application. And I think lots of people who are rolling this out, they don't spend that time to really understand how the enterprise social network can work in the context of people's roles. So I think it's a really, really important point, and having community managers and understanding is absolutely paramount. I think this is a really nice segue because I wanted to talk a little bit about the adoption framework. Sitrion has developed an adoption framework which we make available on our website and you know, for free basically to all of our clients. I know you guys work with helping our clients understand how the adoption framework can help them and really grow engagement in their network. And it's certainly something that when I was rolling out a social network back in my previous job, I would have loved if it had have been invented then, because I feel like we spent a lot of time in a room figuring out how to do this without this awesome framework. So I thought maybe we'd just spend a little bit of time talking about what the adoption framework is, and, you know, in your experience, what you guys find really makes this a super important part of our business and super important for our clients' success. I'm not sure who wants to start off with telling us a little bit about the adoption framework to start with.
I can. So I participated in or you know, provided some feedback into the framework when it was being formed, was when Sitrion, then at that time Newsgator, was developing the framework. And you know, I was on the customer side at that point because prior to joining Sitrion, I was a customer, and I also was so excited about, you know, having this framework, having this kind of flexible tool to be able to apply, because I think a lot of us were out there, you know, trying to sort of help our organizations to be successful, and we knew that it took more than you know, than just having the technology available and just almost the good intentions of collaboration, but it took a holistic, really intentional approach. And I think that this is you know, one of the things that really sets Sitrion apart is our adoption framework, because we have a tested, you know, tool, you know, that you can apply within your organization. And the other thing is that you can, you know, certainly connect with other customers around how they're applying the tool. Because again, remember, it's I say tool, but it's a framework. It's a guidance. It's not meant to be a cookie cutter approach, because we know that there really isn't one, right? It's all going to be how you apply it within your organization. I notice there's actually 2 questions. I'm just flagging that up for you, Luke, as well.
Yep, I see them. We're going to come back to the questions. Actually, one of the questions I'm going to address in our next topic. So let's just move through adoption framework, and we'll definitely come back to a couple of questions that are coming in for sure. Amy, do you want to give us your perspective on the adoption framework, and, you know, how you feel it helps our customers achieve their success?
Okay. Yeah, so for those who don't know, the adoption framework is basically comprised of 3 different, I'll say, paths: people, business, and technology. And in those different 3 areas, there are 6 components for each. And they really identify things that you would perhaps take for granted. Like, hey, we need some proponents of the software out in the field after it's launched, or hey, we need to make sure that we understand, we're going to launch into this department, but typically they're very closed-minded. So we have parts of our adoption framework which address those things and force us to have a formal discussion around that. So we do a cultural assessment to make sure that we know that all the departments or that company's overall I guess, attitude towards social. Are they going to take to it easily, or do you need to get that grassroots campaign going? And then in terms of a grassroots campaign, I had a client tell me once that grassroots is good, but AstroTurf is better because you got to set things up. And you do have to set things up. And that means even if you are starting the project, you need to be reaching out and advertising it, starting your communication plans as soon as you start the project, identifying all the different touch points within the project or during the timeline of the project that you need to communicate out, start to get people involved, and also that AstroTurf really goes beyond the actual launch of the product. So making sure that you have people trained, excited, ready to spread the word. So my thought.
Absolutely. Audrey, did you want to add something to that one?
Sure. My thought on the framework is that, so like I mentioned, I've been working with social software for over 8 years at 2 other companies prior to Sitrion, and have been doing all the similar things with customers and being in the industry, and everyone's talking about the same thing. And I often work with customers that the core team that's been charged with collaboration and rolling out the tool and getting the adoption, the core team is typically pretty educated and knowledgeable about the concepts and what needs to happen. But I think that the adoption framework is really unique and a great asset to have because it's a blueprint, right? It helps, first of all, it helps your core team stay focused and say, okay, here's everything we have to do, and we're going to iterate. It's not like we're going to do it once and we're done. But it's also a great tool to help educate others that may not be as kind of schooled on collaboration as you. So this, I've seen people be able to take this adoption framework and help educate their leadership and getting investment in the right activities. People really need to understand that it is this effort, this undertaking that needs time and attention and investment. And I think the adoption framework is a nice way that kind of componentizes it all and puts it all on a piece of paper so you can take a look at it from a 50,000-foot view.
Yeah, and I'll add to that, Luke, that in my years of consulting with portal implementations, all of these things, as Audrey said, had been talked about before. When you have the adoption framework, it comes with our implementation. So it's a way to formalize the reaching out to people and brings it beyond the technology to everybody else. So I really feel strongly that it really helps these 6 components and each of these 3 pillars really help make everybody think that it's a cognitive effort. So.
Right, I think it's like looking at that big picture view.
Yeah.
And it's also good to think about, the adoption framework is really targeted at people who are sort of responsible for adoption, responsible for the project or for the launch of the social initiative, right? But as Audrey pointed out, you can use that as a way to sort of have those conversations that will help drive home the importance of looking at this big picture. So it's not just about technology, we know that, it's about people's goals. You have to look at all 3 aspects of the people, the business, and the technology so that you have that real holistic big picture view. And as Amy pointed out, it's not new. When she was rolling out portals, you were looking at this. It's really a program of change. We know that there's a program of change that needs to go along with any social initiative.
Guys, this is an awesome conversation. I want to move us along to the last topic I wanted to talk about. And please, if you are watching, please jump on the Q&A and ask some questions of the panelists. If you are coming in late, I apologize. I understand we had some technical problems at the beginning of the Hangout, but I think we are rolling now, and we have recorded all of this one. So if you missed the beginning, we'll make sure it gets out to you on YouTube as soon as we can after the end of the meeting. I want to talk now a little bit about metrics and measurements. We did touch on it briefly before. I know it's a super hot topic for a lot of our customers, and we have a question here from one of our customers who's saying, you know, when we talk about social and collaboration, if we want to look at metrics, how do we choose a number to demonstrate the business value of this stuff? So I guess I'm interested in knowing, like, you know, if we wanted to say, like, what's the right number when we're looking at measuring network health or success of adoption? How do we know what that is? Like, I know when I was doing this a couple of years ago, I really struggled, like, to get my head around reporting and metrics for senior managers, and especially in numbers-driven kind of organizations. Even now, like, measuring engage, you know, getting working out, like, what the right things to really indicate the health of the network are. You know, it's a struggle for everyone. So I'm interested in hearing with you guys who do this a lot. You know, what are the right numbers if we want to talk numbers?
That's a hard question to answer, right? I think everybody struggles with that. One of the things that pops to mind is with our engagement scorecard, you can measure questions and answers and response times. And so what you look for in terms of adoption, I mean, you know, you can have a lot of people actually looking at a community and looking at the news feed and getting some tacit information, tacit learning, but you really want to look at also who's engaged. And that would actually look at, okay, if you're looking for information, are you asking questions, and are your questions getting answered? And that really comes back to the role of the community manager, being able to facilitate those questions being answered. If they're talking to an MVP that they've identified in their community, making sure that those people are notified as well, even though that they do get notifications. Sometimes things just need to be fertilized a little bit, if we want to use the whole garden growing analogy. So looking at engagement in terms of activity, questions and answers is important, just for one perspective of mine.
Audrey, did you want to tell us what you think the right numbers are when we're talking numbers?
Yes. Everybody always wants to know the numbers and what's the magic number and what number should we be hitting. And unfortunately, I do not have that magic answer for anybody until I start working with them, you know, on a more week-to-week level and understand the types of activities that they're trying to get their audience to be doing. I think it's a combination of, you definitely want to have access to metrics, and you want to be paying attention to them and benchmark them. I often advise clients that you want to look at your trends and compare your trends to some of the adoption activities that you're trying to do. So if you have a recent campaign, have the activity metrics changed based on the rollout of that campaign. That's going to tell you if your campaign was well received, or if it was successful, or if it wasn't. If it was well received, keep doing that. Do more of that type of thing. But there's more than just metrics. I really do think part of it is anecdotal stories about value that the users are getting, as well as sentiment. And so that requires that human connection. It's talking with your community managers, getting a sense of what's happening within their communities. You can't just sit behind a giant data center and look at red and yellow, green buttons and know whether or not your adoption is successful. You really do have to be connected with your audience.
Allison, I know you have something to say on this one. I've had a few things I want to like put in my 10 cents, and I have to remember the panelists. You're the host.
You're the host today, Luke. We know you have an opinion too. So I love what Audrey just said about, you know, you can't just focus in on the metrics, right? I think it's really important to have metrics, and one of the reasons why our scorecard has been so successful is because, you know, people do struggle with this, and they want to be able to show that their network is maturing. But how do you get to numbers? You start with what do you want to achieve. Okay, you just back to those business goals. You need to know what it is you're trying to do. Then that will help guide you towards the metrics that are most important. So even if we were to show, I mean, our scorecard measures a lot of different stuff, right? You're not necessarily going to hone in on all those different aspects. Some things that will go into the metrics discussion will be, okay, what do you want to focus on? What are you trying to achieve, and what are the metrics that will help you tell that story, right? Everyone knows, if you ever done any kind of measuring, you don't just measure for the sake of measuring. And then you have a lot of pretty graphs and a dashboard, and no one really knows anything. You've not learned anything from it. And then you need to supplement that with those stories of success. So when you're looking at launching a new social initiative, I would say pick 1 or 2, maybe 3 key use cases that you're trying to enable, right? Keep it small, keep it achievable, focus in on those 1 to 3 stories that you're trying to tell. Make sure that you are providing all of that foundational stuff that will help those use cases be successful. Make sure they have community management. You want to make sure that they have an ambassador network. You're going to want to measure it. You're going to want to make sure somebody's in there every day interacting. All those foundational elements that are outlined within our framework, and then capture those stories and use those success stories to help, tell the story of what's possible, tell the story of value. Any of you guys who are responsible for a social initiative or responsible for adoption within a social initiative, that you often will get asked that ROI question, oh, show us where there's value in this. And the metrics will help you to some degree, and then make sure you're augmenting that with those stories, because those use cases will not just help you tell the story of value, of ROI, they'll also help you tell the story of what's possible. In other words, they'll be like little seeds that you can plant out into the wider community, and other communities can use them as a model to be able to then see what's possible.
Absolutely. This is all really good advice. I hope that kind of answers the question, and we'd be happy to pick this metrics topic up again in Engage or online afterwards. We have another question from Cara, and it's around. I'll read it out as it is. It says, circling back to the top-down approach when senior leaders are promoting and encouraging adoption, what are some specific and successful ways you've seen leaders do this? And I just add, Cara, that tomorrow at 1 o'clock in Engage, we are having a live chat about executive engagement. So if you want to jump into that, please do. And if not, actually, Allison and I are going to be on site with you guys on Thursday. So we can have a face-to-face chat. We're having happy hour on Thursday night at 5:30, and we'd love you to join us. But let's talk to the panelists. Just a plug for my little happy hour there. Let's talk to the panelists, and guys, tell us about executive engagement. Top tips.
From a tactical perspective, when we talk about executive engagement, it coordinates or correlates back to that thing called coalition in the adoption framework, right? Knowing who you can actually count on. And you also have to know who is going to be your biggest objector. And when you look at that, you look at the different levels of people, and you start to see who has the best relationship with those different levels of people. I've worked with clients that have specific roles that are like business relationship managers with management, so that they are a liaison role. And you can use them as, part of the tactical strategy to get people involved. In smaller organizations, I've seen training efforts, and that includes like pilot training efforts, that go directly to the leader's desk and take 5 minutes and say, hey, have you tried this? Have you tried this? It's super easy. So I think it depends, but you need to have a plan. And the plan is based upon the culture of your organization.
Sure. Allison?
So I think that this is the holy grail of adoption that everybody's trying to crack, right? How do you get that executive engagement? And it's not just sponsorship that you're going after actual engagement. So having someone say, yes, I rubber stamp this, I support it, okay, go out and be social, is great as a starting point, but only to the degree to which it's successful. And if they're not walking the walk, right? If they're not modeling the behavior that they want to promote, then you're going to struggle. People will say, well, our leader's not actually doing it, so why should we? And there's a couple behavioral hurdles that you're trying to get over here. People need to understand that it's okay to participate, and part of that leader engaging is to help demonstrate that it's okay, that you have that permissibility factor, right? So, I mean, I've seen some very successful initiatives where you had, senior leadership buy-in from the get-go, right? And they're helping to drive this. But I've also seen people do it from more of that grassroots approach. Examples like Amy used of having this kind of coaching, or some of our customers have used a reverse mentoring program. We actually have somebody who gets social. Those are maybe your ambassadors, to go and sit down with people that don't get it, hopefully a leadership position or a management position, and help coach them and do kind of little one-on-one. I think that if you haven't cracked this, don't give up. There's a lot of, I guess you're in good company, because a lot of organizations haven't quite cracked this yet, and that's because it's really a journey. I mean, this is something that really takes time, because we're talking about changing the way that people actually work, changing the way that the way they're currently doing something and moving it into a new way, and that means you're changing human behavior. So I think you're always going to be going after this senior leadership engagement, but it doesn't mean that if you don't have it, you just chuck it all in and you're done. You just keep always kind of, moving towards that, and it's part of the maturity model that you're seeking.
Luke, I'll just add one more thing, and Allison, this kind of piggybacks off of your changing behavior. So, work out loud is, it's a hashtag. It's something that people are like, okay, it's great, let's work out loud, but I'm really afraid to do it. So I think a lot of times it's good to give people some tactical examples or some tactical tasks to look at. So if you have an email distribution group that a manager normally emails to, could you post that information in a community? When you're doing emails, are you sending that to like more than 5 people? Do you think other people could benefit from the information in the email? Do you think that you could benefit from other people's input into the email? Those are very tactical things that you can do in coaching somebody in order to kind of change that culture. So, Audrey, you popped up into my screen for some reason.
Oh.
Audrey, did you want to add something to this question as well, the executive?
Let's see. I mean, it's all good stuff. I can just share, from observing client experiences, that if you've got that senior engagement, that's great, and consider yourself incredibly lucky. I think a lot of organizations have pockets of executive support. There are individuals that need to be persuaded, and like the girls were saying, you just got to keep going and trying different approaches. I definitely think that the one-on-one can really help when you just sit down with an executive or a senior manager, and you just show them and have them complete their profile. Show them really kind of low barrier, easy ways to get started, liking certain activity. That I think a lot of leaders that think that they need to start doing a blog every week, and they don't have time for that. But if you can kind of show them that actually you can participate quickly, easy, make it obvious that you are in here listening to people, seeing their comments, and start to engage little by little, that can get them over the hump.
And so, Audrey and Allison, when you coach clients, do you coach leaders to make like one post a day and then make sure they give one feedback or comment a day? Like, do you have a specific number that you shoot for?
Not a day. I feel like that's too much. I think it's unrealistic to ask people to post something every day. But if they can just look at it 3 times a week and do those likes and do a comment, then give them an easy starting point. For the folks that are skeptical and not sure about this social thing.
Yep, and then you have to go potentially have your ambassadors, your community managers out there making sure that they always get a response, they always get some interaction, they always get that reinforcement. These are the little tricks, and I always tell clients, don't be afraid to fake it until you make it, So if you have to go to, John's desk and tell him, hey, can you go please respond to that post, because creating that sense of permissibility and answering that question, that human question that we all have, is it okay for me to do this? Is it okay for me to participate like this in a work environment? It takes like almost like a momentum, a critical mass of interaction, and so you may need to be very intentional about how you go about reinforcing that behavior, so that people feel like, oh, look, I always get a response. Somebody's out there listening to me. Someone cares what I have to say.
And even, Luke, if you look at community managers, we haven't really talked about the role of the community manager, but
that was actually the topic of our last Sitrion talk. We talked about that for 40 minutes, and we could have talked about it all day. I feel like this is going to be one of those talks as well.
Well, I just think it's so important to support the community managers. I have a client that actually does ongoing meetings for community managers, and that could help them, teach them about how to engage with leaders, how to give people that friendly prodding, and also going back to that, trending thing. You could have those community managers share the trends within their communities, and then based upon the culture of the organization and the comparisons of what others are doing, learn. Do we need to sunset this community? Is it no longer being used? Is it no longer valuable? Or, do we need to have an additional community manager for something where, this person is overwhelmed, it's not a full-time role, and, we need help because this is growing so much. So I think having that, I'm going to say, coalition of community managers and that ongoing support of them is super important.
Absolutely. Guys, I want to wrap it up there. We could talk about adoption, engagement, and community management, and all of these things which are super exciting to me and you guys. We could talk about them all day. And I just want to say thank you for coming on and doing Sitrion Talks. Now, this is your first big debut on YouTube, so now you guys are famous. We're gonna spread you all around Twitter. We'll leave it there, guys. If anyone who is watching has any questions today for any of the panelists, please shoot me an email. Let me know. I'm happy to connect you with them. Like I said before, if you're in Boston, we're going to be there on Thursday night, so shoot me an email and let me know. We would love to see you at our happy hour that we're hosting. Please join us next month on Thursday, the 7th of November. Thursday, the 6th of November at 3 p.m. Eastern. We're going to be joined by Anne Bartlett-Bragg, who's one of our partners down under in Sydney, Australia, and she's going to talk about user-generated content and why this gives enterprises the social advantage. So it's a great talk, actually, that she did at our collective down in Sydney, and I'm excited that we found a time when both you guys here in the US and her were awake. So she'll be joining us next time. Thanks, Allison, Amy, Audrey. Awesome talk, and I'll see you guys soon.
Thanks, Luke.
Bye-bye.